Welcome, dear listener. You found your way to Sleepy Historian, a quiet corner of the internet where time slows down, where we drift through the forgotten corridors of the past, not to chase excitement, but to find stillness. This is boring history for sleep. Calm bedtime storytelling and soft-spoken history documentaries designed for gentle minds and tired eyes. If this kind of storytelling helps you rest, feel free to like the video and subscribe, but only if it truly brings you peace. And if you'd like, tell me in the comments where you're listening from and what time it is. It's strangely comforting to know who else is out there, quietly drifting off to the same old stories, the same soft rhythm of history. So dim the lights. Let the voices of the past settle like dust upon marble floors. Let the myths unfold. And let's begin. Tonight, we wander into the quiet world of Greek temples. Not the gods and heroes you may already know, but the superstitions that lingered between their marble columns and sunlit courtyards. The half-whispered fears of the priests. The tiny offerings left by farmers before dawn. The omens, the curses, the unseen spirits thought to dwell among the altars. Long before philosophers reasoned their way through the cosmos, the people of Greece lived in a world trembling with hidden signs, a leaf fluttering in the wrong direction, a sneeze during prayer, a snake crossing the temple steps. Each moment was watched by invisible eyes. Each sound could be a message from the divine, or a warning to turn back. Across this journey, we'll move slowly through 4 quiet landscapes of superstition. First, we'll walk through the daily life of a humble temple, the sweeping of sacred dust, the silent meals of the attendants, the hush before dawn prayers. Then, we'll meet a priest of Delphi, tracing his life among incense, omens, and whispered prophecy. After that, we'll explore the mystery of sacred objects and archaeological finds, strange rituals preserved in stone and clay. And finally, we'll step into the world of the powerful, where superstition shaped politics and kings feared the same small signs as shepherds did. Each segment is a window into another rhythm of existence, one where the divine and the ordinary brush shoulders every day, where the line between belief and fear was as thin as the smoke curling from an oil lamp. So, find your most comfortable position. Let your breathing slow. Imagine the air warm with olive oil and distant sea salt, the sound of cicadas fading as the sun dips behind the columns of an ancient sanctuary. This is your time to drift through stories older than sleep itself. Welcome to Forgotten Superstitions of Greek Temples. Welcome to Sleepy Historian. Imagine, for a moment, that you are walking before sunrise. The sky above the Aegean is still a pale, uncertain gray. The first calls of birds ripple through the olive groves, soft and deliberate, like the awakening breath of the world. Ahead of you stands the outline of a temple, white stone that seems to glow faintly even before the sun touches it. This is not the temple of mythic heroes or thunderous gods, but a quiet provincial sanctuary, small, orderly, and bound by custom more than grandeur. Inside, the air carries the faint fragrance of olive oil, burnt resin, and damp stone. You hear no voices, only the rhythmic brushing of a broom, a temple servant sweeping dust from the marble floor. Every motion is measured. Nothing is hurried. The temple must be kept pure, and purity, in the Greek world, was not merely a matter of cleanliness. It was the daily conversation between human hands and divine order. In these early hours, the priests and attendants move in silence. One trims the wick of an oil lamp, careful not to let the flame die. Another arranges small clay dishes filled with barley and salt, simple offerings placed before a low altar. They believe the gods dwell not only in statues, but in the invisible balance of the day. To forget a gesture, to speak too soon, or to spill the oil would invite misfortune. Outside, near the entrance, the first worshippers approach. They are farmers, fishermen, and shepherds, ordinary people whose lives depend on winds and harvests. They bring small tokens, a cluster of figs, a pinch of honey, a folded strip of wool. Each offering carries its own superstition. Honey is for persuasion, to sweeten the temper of the gods. Wool is for protection, a thread to bind illness or envy before it reaches the body. Even the way the gift is placed upon the altar follows rules. If the hand trembles, it is thought that the gods notice, and their attention, once stirred, must be carefully appeased. The priest watches quietly. He has done this every morning for decades, his gestures softened into ritual. He notes the signs that others might ignore. The flicker of the flame, the sudden flight of a bird, the way incense drifts toward the door instead of the statue. Such details are not accidents. They are messages. The temple, in its silence, constantly speaks. In a corner, an attendant polishes the bronze mirror used in ceremonies. It is said that if one looks into the mirror at the wrong hour, when the sun strikes its edge, the reflection might show more than a face, perhaps a shadow of what is to come. Most avoid looking directly. Superstitions like these thread through every object, every sound, every small duty of temple life. As daylight strengthens, the sanctuary becomes alive in a calm, deliberate rhythm. A youth carries a jar of water from a spring beyond the wall. He walks slowly, careful not to spill a drop. That spring is sacred. Its water must remain unbroken from source to altar. If a bird drinks from it first, the day's blessings are considered diluted, and the ceremony must wait until the following dawn. A dog barks in the distance. The priest pauses, counts the echoes, and notes the direction. Such omens, he believes, are not random. 3 barks from the north mean caution in trade. 2 from the south, safe travel by sea. To modern ears, these details might sound quaint or even strange, but in this world, superstition fills the space between uncertainty and control, a soft net cast over the chaos of living. Within the courtyard, small statues stand in neat rows, worn, unremarkable, their features softened by years of sun. They represent the countless minor spirits once honored here, the guardian of doors, the keeper of bees, the shade that protects sleeping children. Each spirit receives a crumb of bread or a drop of milk. The offerings are not grand gestures, but quiet negotiations, daily exchanges that preserve harmony. As noon nears, shadows shorten and the temple hums with warmth. The marble radiates a gentle heat. The priests retreat to shaded chambers, where they eat in silence, bread, olives, perhaps a slice of dried fish. They chew slowly, mindful that even mealtime carries meaning. A crumb that falls upon the floor must be brushed into the hearth, never thrown away. Fire, they believe, transforms what is lost into what is forgiven. Later, as the air cools again, the cycle repeats. The sweeping, the tending of lamps, the whispers of small fears. To live within a temple is to live within rhythm. The same gestures, the same careful watch for signs. Each day folds into the next like waves upon a quiet shore, indistinguishable yet eternal. And as night approaches, the sanctuary glows once more in lamplight. The attendants close the great wooden doors. From the hills, faint music drifts, a flute, a distant song. The gods, they say, prefer such modest sounds to the clamor of the city. Within these walls, time slows until it nearly stops. Stone, flame, and breath share a single, steady silence. In that silence, you can almost hear the heartbeat of superstition itself, soft, persistent, and strangely comforting. When morning becomes day, the sacred routine deepens into quiet repetition, a rhythm as constant as the sea. The priests of the temple live within this rhythm, woven into it as seamlessly as the shadows beneath the columns. Their lives are not dramatic, nor do they seek recognition. They move with a patience that has outlasted generations, guided by rules older than memory. Each priest wakes before the sun. He bathes in water drawn from the sacred spring, never using the same vessel twice. The act is not about cleanliness, but about renewal, the gentle washing away of mortal dust before standing in the presence of divinity. He whispers a short prayer as he dries his hands, a verse so ancient that its meaning has blurred. To speak it is to maintain the thread of continuity, one more link in a chain stretching back centuries. The day begins in the courtyard, where offerings have been placed overnight. Some are humble, figs left by travelers, a bit of wine sealed with wax, a sprig of rosemary tied with twine. Others are elaborate, tiny bronze figurines, sculpted with care by the wealthy who seek favor or forgiveness. Yet no gift is ever dismissed as small. Even the simplest grain of barley is believed to catch the god's attention, if offered with sincerity. The priest walks slowly among these tokens, murmuring blessings. They inspect each one, noting how it rests, how the shadows fall across it. If a bird has disturbed an offering, they mark it as an omen. A crow's feather is a warning. A dove's footprint means peace. They record these things on thin pieces of wax tablet, not as proof, but as memory, fragments of invisible dialogue between mortal and divine. Throughout the morning, the temple fills with subdued activity. Women from the nearby village bring garlands of laurel and time to hang around the outer columns. They do not enter. Most temples restrict entry to men or designated priestesses, but they linger, whispering their prayers to the wind. They believe the gods hear even what is not spoken aloud. A sigh, a glance, a pause at the threshold, all count as communication. Within the temple, silence reigns again. A young acolyte kneels before a statue of Apollo, polishing its base with olive oil. The statue's face is smooth, its eyes blank, yet full of attention. A single drop of oil slides down the marble cheek and onto the offering table. The acolyte freezes. A drop falling to the wrong place can be taken as a sign, a message from the god, or perhaps disapproval. He calls the elder priest, who studies the mark carefully. After a moment's thought, he decides it means heed the coming day. The words are calm, without urgency, yet everyone in the temple adjusts their behavior slightly. More cautious, more deliberate. Superstition is not a burden here. It is a rhythm of awareness, a way of staying attuned to the unseen. At midday, the temple's great bronze gong sounds softly, not a loud command, but a resonant hum that ripples across the courtyard. It marks the transition from morning rites to afternoon contemplation. The priests gather in a shaded hall, where the air is thick with the scent of herbs hung to dry. They sit upon woven mats and discuss omens, dreams, and petitions received from nearby villages. Their voices remain steady, almost monotone. One speaks of a farmer whose ox refused to move at the edge of a field. Another recalls a fisher who caught no fish despite clear skies. They weigh these occurrences against lunar cycles and recorded signs. No single event holds meaning on its own. Meaning emerges only through patterns, through repetition, like waves carving stone. Later, one priest writes a list of temple expenses: oil, incense, wax, and barley. His handwriting is slow, curved, and careful. Writing itself is treated as sacred. Every stroke of the stylus must be made with pure intention. Even a misplaced could invite confusion or divine misreading. He pauses before each word, exhaling softly. In that pause, the ancient world feels still and suspended, as though time itself is listening. By evening, the daily offerings are cleared away. The priests burn what cannot be reused: wreaths, old flowers, bits of bread, in a low fire at the edge of the courtyard. The smoke rises into the darkening air, carrying prayers upward. It is said that the shape of the smoke reveals the god's response. If it drifts straight, all is well. If it curls sharply, one must proceed with caution. And if the smoke splits into two trails, it may be a warning that choice itself lies ahead, a path yet undecided. As dusk approaches, a soft golden glow spreads across the temple walls. The priests light new lamps and walk once more through the halls, checking the corners for shadows that seem too long or too sharp. Light itself is a sign of balance. Its failure is a sign of neglect. They murmur one final blessing before locking the outer gates. Beyond the walls, the world continues. Farmers calling to their animals, the distant sound of waves against the rocks, the rustling of olive branches. But within the sacred space, all remains perfectly still. Only the faint crackle of a lamp and the whisper of burning oil break the silence. For those who serve within the temple, superstition was not fear, it was order. Each motion, each sign, each echo of the past offered reassurance that the world, however unpredictable, could be read like a sacred text. To live by superstition was to live with rhythm, comfort, and meaning. And as the stars rise over the Aegean, the priests sleep within the temple walls, surrounded by the quiet hum of the divine. Not as thunder or miracle, but as stillness itself. Night falls slowly over the sanctuary. The marble cools, and the air thickens with the scent of oil and dust. Beyond the temple's outer wall, crickets begin their endless song, a quiet music that blends with the flicker of the lamps. The attendants move like shadows through the corridors, preparing the temple for sleep. Yes, even the temple itself must rest. Its doors are closed not only to protect the offerings, but to preserve the sanctity of silence. Imagine yourself seated upon the temple steps, the stones still warm beneath you. The stars are emerging, one by one, over the dark outline of the hills. In the courtyard, a single flame still burns at the altar. It must never go out, not even for a moment. The eternal flame is said to carry the breath of the god. Its survival ensures the world remains balanced, its cycles unbroken. When the priests sleep, a novice stays awake beside it, whispering short verses to keep his mind steady. He listens to the wind. He listens to the stillness between each chirp of the night insects. Each sound becomes part of the temple's heartbeat. The night watch is not easy. Sleep tempts the body, but superstition guards the mind. It is believed that to drift into sleep before the final lamp check might invite spirits to whisper into one's dreams. So the young attendant stays alert, reciting sacred names, tracing small circles on the floor with his finger, a symbol of eternal vigilance. Nearby, small clay figurines rest upon a low shelf. Women with folded arms, miniature horses, doves, serpents. Each one is a prayer in physical form. Some are left to heal the sick, others to protect newborns or sailors far from shore. They remain in the temple long after their makers are gone, their meaning fading into mystery. But still, they are tended, dusted, realigned, occasionally turn to face a different direction if a priest senses that the energy around them has changed. In the distance, the faint sound of the sea hums beneath the night wind. The Greeks believed that the gods listened through the elements, that water, in particular, carried voices between realms. It was said that if one spoke softly beside a stream, the words might reach a deity more clearly than a shouted prayer. So even the smallest trickle of water near the sanctuary is treated with reverence. No one spits near it. No one steps across it without murmuring a word of apology. Inside the temple, the rhythm of sacred time continues, unhurried, repeating, like the turning of a wheel. Each day mirrors the one before it, and yet no day is quite the same. The priests keep track of these cycles using lunar stones, small discs carved with marks that correspond to phases of the moon. When the moon grows bright, ceremonies increase. When it wanes, the temple grows quiet again, retreating into reflection. This rhythm dictates not only rituals, but emotions. Even laughter is quieter during the dark moon, while conversations swell again as light returns. In such a world, superstition is not decoration. It is the very architecture of time. At certain intervals, the villagers gather at the gates with torches. They do not enter but stand outside the wall, their faces glowing in the amber light. They chant verses learned from their grandparents, half prayer, half lullaby. The words promise safety from storms and sickness. Some carry jars of salt water from the sea to sprinkle on the ground, a ritual believed to keep away envy. The priests listen from within the courtyard, answering with low tones that echo softly against the stone. The exchange is gentle, a dialogue between faith and formality, between the world within the walls and the world beyond. Later, when the torches die down, the temple returns to its deeper silence. The young attendants lie on reed mats near the entrance, their bodies arranged so that they face east toward the sunrise. To sleep facing east is thought to draw wisdom from Apollo when morning arrives. No one questions this rule. It is simply part of how things have always been. Sometimes before dawn, the elder priest walks through the courtyard, counting his steps aloud, always in multiples of 3. 3 steps to the fountain, 3 steps to the altar, 3 steps to the door. Numbers hold meaning. 3 signifies harmony, 5 invites uncertainty, 7 suggests divine presence. His murmured counting is soft and steady, blending with the night air. When he finishes, he pauses, breathes deeply, and touches the temple door. The touch seals the night and opens the morning. Soon, the faintest line of light appears in the sky. The attendant by the flames stands, stretches, and exhales in relief. He has stayed awake. He has guarded the boundary between night and day, between superstition and sleep. The flame still burns. The gods, he believes, are pleased. Outside, the world stirs again. Donkeys bray in the distance, and the first shepherd calls to his flock. The temple, once a place of shadow and silence, begins its slow return to motion. The air carries the scent of dew on stone, the gentle sweetness of crushed time underfoot. Another day begins, and with it, another endless cycle of ritual, omen, and reverence. The ancient Greeks believed that life itself was sustained by such cycles. To live correctly was to keep them unbroken. To forget a gesture, a prayer, or a rhythm was to invite disorder, and disorder was the doorway to chaos. So they repeated each act faithfully, generation after generation, trusting that their care kept the balance of the world intact. In that constancy lies a kind of peace, the peace of knowing that the same sun, the same wind, the same flame will return again tomorrow. And in that peace, superstition becomes less about fear and more about belonging, a quiet belief that every sound, every light, every whisper of wind means something. Something steady, something eternal. Imagine the world narrowing to a single mountain, the great slopes of Parnassus, where the wind moves with the sound of unseen voices. At its base lies Delphi, once called the navel of the world, where mortals came to question fate itself. Here, beneath the watchful gaze of Apollo, the temple rises in pale terraces of marble and light, and among its keepers walks a man known only as the priest of the god. His name, like so many names of the past, is forgotten, but his rhythm of life, his daily movements, and his silent duties remain, faint impressions preserved in the dust of history. The priest wakes before dawn, when the mountain air still carries the night's chill. He listens to the wind through the cypress trees, waiting for it to shift. If it blows from the east, the day's omens will be favorable. If from the west, silence must be observed until noon. He does not question these signs. They are older than reason, woven into the bones of the sanctuary. His dwelling is simple, a stone chamber built near the temple's outer court. The floor is strewn with straw, the air faintly perfumed with the smoke of burned laurel. He wears a linen robe, plain but clean, tied with a cord dyed in saffron. The scent of the fabric mixes with oil and ash, the perfume of devotion. In the corner, an earthen jug holds water from the Castalian spring. Every priest must drink from that spring before speaking any sacred word. They believe it purifies thought itself, washing away dreams and doubts, leaving only what the gods wish to be heard. As the sun climbs, the priest walks the path toward the main sanctuary, a path worn smooth by centuries of pilgrims. Along the way, he passes small stone shrines, markers left by travelers who once sought Apollo's voice. Some of these shrines hold coins or pebbles arranged in careful patterns. He does not disturb them. Each pebble is a prayer, each coin a fragment of hope. To touch them without invitation would break the chain between petitioner and God. When he reaches the temple gate, he bows, not deeply, just enough to acknowledge the boundary he is about to cross. Inside, the air hums faintly, alive with expectation. He walks toward the inner chamber, where the oracle, the Pythia, will soon take her seat. The room is dim, lit only by shafts of sunlight that fall through narrow openings in the roof. The floor bears circular carvings, concentric rings meant to guide the gaze inward toward stillness. At the center lies the sacred tripod, a bronze stand, worn but gleaming. Upon it rests a small bronze bowl filled with spring water, a mirror for the divine. Before the oracle enters, the priest performs a quiet ritual. He sprinkles barley upon the floor, tracing invisible patterns in the dust. He murmurs ancient words whose meanings have long dissolved, their power now residing only in their sound. To outsiders, These actions might seem like superstition, but to him, they are the architecture of the sacred. Without them, meaning cannot descend into words. Soon, the Pythia arrives. She is veiled, her face serene. She sits upon the tripod, her hands resting upon her knees. A priest offers her laurel leaves and a bowl of water from the spring. The air shifts. Outside, the sound of the wind grows softer, as though the mountain itself is listening. The priest steps back, taking his place behind her. He will not speak until the god speaks through her. Moments stretch in his silence. Then a faint hum begins. Not music, not speech, but something between the two. The Pythia's voice rises in fragmented phrases, half poem, half breath. The priest listens carefully, translating each sound into human words. He knows that what she says is not prophecy in the sense of prediction, but reflection, a mirror of the mind shaped by divine rhythm. Yet to the people waiting outside, every syllable holds the weight of destiny. When the oracle finishes, her breathing slows. The priest wraps her shoulders in linen and guides her gently away. He writes what he has heard on a wax tablet, not quickly, but with measured care. Each line must be recorded precisely, for words are fragile vessels. One misplaced stroke could change the meaning entirely. Afterward, he steps outside into the brightness of midday. The pilgrims bow as he passes, some weeping with relief, others trembling with confusion. They believe they have glimpsed fate. He believes they have glimpsed themselves, but he does not say so aloud. It is not his place to interpret beyond a ritual. His duty is only to preserve the form, to maintain the vessel through which belief can flow. By evening, when the crowd has dispersed, he walks once more to the edge of the mountain. From here, Delphi seems suspended between earth and sky. The valley stretches below, pale and quiet, scattered with olive trees. He inhales the scent of them, sharp, resinous, alive. He feels the air growing cooler and the light turning amber. In that stillness, superstition and faith merge until they are indistinguishable. A bird's sudden flight might mean approval. A trembling leaf might foretell rain. All is connected, all alive, all watching. As the stars appear, he lights a small lamp and carries it back to the temple. Tomorrow, he will repeat the same actions, in the same order, at the same hour. For the priest of Delphi, this constancy is not monotony. It is devotion, a dialogue without words. And those centuries will pass, and the temple itself will fall to ruin. His rhythm remains echoing in the silence. Breathe, bow, listen, write. Somewhere in that rhythm, the ancient world still exhales, still waiting, still listening, still believing that the gods might speak, softly, through the ordinary patterns of time. Night at Delphi is unlike any other. It does not descend, it awakens. The stars seem closer here, sharper, as if drawn by the magnetic breath of the mountain. The temple, empty now of pilgrims, hums faintly in the dark. Stone holds sound for a long time. The walls remember every question ever asked within them. The priest moves slowly through the colonnade, the small lamp in his hand, tracing light across carved marble. Figures of gods and heroes look down, their expressions caught between mercy and indifference. He stops beside the great altar, where a thin wisp of incense still curls upward. The smoke rises like a thought leaving the mind. He watches it twist, vanish, and reform, a perfect symbol of his work. Interpretation, prayer, silence, all are different shapes of the same invisible motion. Each night, before sleep, he performs a quiet duty. He cleans the writing tablet used during the day, melting the wax slightly and smoothing the surface with a bronze blade. He then rewrites, from memory, the phrases that the oracle spoke. This second version is not for the pilgrims. It is for the record, for Apollo, for time. Sometimes he changes nothing. Sometimes he removes a word. Sometimes, when the meaning is too heavy, he writes the sentence backward, making it unreadable to all but the god. That is how he protects what must remain divine. He pauses to warm his hands over the small oil flame. The night air bites, yet he does not shiver. Long ago, he stopped feeling cold the way others do. Perhaps devotion itself burns warmer than flesh. He closes his eyes and listens. Somewhere in the darkness, the sound of a distant flute echoes from a traveler's campfire. It drifts upward like memory, fragile, incomplete, but alive. He remembers his youth then, not as nostalgia, but as a question. He had come to Delphi as a boy, carrying nothing but a clay bowl and a note written by a dying teacher. The temple took him in. They taught him ritual, scripture, silence. Years became indistinguishable. The mountain taught him patience. The god taught him restraint. Now, decades later, he wonders if he has become an instrument or an echo, if he speaks for the divine, or if he merely repeats what silence allows him to hear. Outside, the olive groves tremble in a faint breeze. He sets down the lamp and walks barefoot into the courtyard. The stones are cool beneath his feet. He looks toward the valley, where the faintest glimmer of torchlight marks a caravan passing far below. Every night, strangers move across that valley seeking signs. They carry offerings, questions, and fear. He knows their fear well. The fear of not knowing is the oldest wound in humankind. A faint scent of burning laurel lingers in the air, sweet, bitter, divine. He kneels beside the sacred hearth and whispers a verse. Fire within stone, speak not of light, but of what light leaves behind. The words vanish into the night like breath on glass. He opens his eyes and gazes upward at the constellations. He knows them all by name, not as shapes of myth, but as ancient friends. Each star is a reminder that the universe answers in its own language, whether or not we understand. In that moment, something shifts. A flicker in the lamplight, a tremor in the wind. He feels it, subtle, electric, the presence that comes before revelation. It is not fear that grips him, but recognition. The same stillness that filled the temple earlier now fills the air around him. He knows what it means. A message, unsought, yet meant for him alone. He returns to the sanctuary. The tripod gleams faintly in the moonlight. He approaches it, kneeling beside the bowl of water. The surface quivers, reflecting the stars. He whispers a prayer, not in the language of priests, but in the language of the heart, wordless, unguarded. And then he waits. At first, nothing happens. Then, a single drop of water ripples outward from the center of the bowl. No hand touched it. No breath disturbed it. He watches as the ripples expand and fade. A line forms in his mind, as though spoken from within rather than without. When the god is silent, it is because the answer is already known. He does not write it down. Some words are not meant to be captured. Instead, he simply bows, the motion slow, almost weightless. He understands, perhaps for the first time, that his life's purpose was never to reveal mystery, but to protect it. He sits there until dawn. When the first light enters the temple, painting the walls in golden rose, he feels something release inside him, a long-held tension dissolving into peace. He rises, his limbs steady, and extinguishes the lamp. The flame dies without smoke. He looks at the faint wisp curling above it and smiles. All things end as they began, in silence and breath. Later that morning, the pilgrims arrive. They ask for guidance, for hope, for meaning. He greets them gently, guiding them through the rituals. But inside, something has shifted forever. He no longer seeks signs in the wind or the stars. He understands now that every question, no matter how sacred, leads back to the same still center. The voice of Apollo is not in the temple. It is in the pause between thoughts, the heartbeat between words. And so, when evening falls again, he walks one last time to the edge of the mountain. The valley glows beneath the dying sun. He breathes deeply, tasting the dust and light. Then he closes his eyes, and for the first time, he does not pray. He simply listens. To the wind, to the world, to the silence that was never empty, only waiting to be heard. Morning light spills slowly through the eastern columns of the sanctuary. It catches the edges of carved stone, turning the once white marble to honey and gold. The air is clear, but fragile, as though the mountain itself were holding its breath. It is the year when the world begins to forget its gods, though no one calls it that yet. The priest walks through the courtyard, his hands folded within his robes. Around him, the olive trees stand quiet, their silver leaves barely moving. He can feel the weight of change in the stillness, not in the wind or the clouds, but in the rhythm of footsteps that no longer echo through the valley. Fewer pilgrims come now. The path to Delphi, once lined with processions and offerings, grows empty with each season. Rumors travel faster than faith. Rome has turned its gaze elsewhere. The empire's gods are multiplying and fading all at once. He pauses by the fountain. The water is low, its reflection rippling with sunlight. A swallow dips to drink and vanishes again into the sky. He watches it, knowing instinctively that it too will not return tomorrow. The world, it seems, has chosen to move on. Yet the temple remains, dignified, even in neglect. The columns still rise in serene defiance of time. The laurel still grows near the threshold, fragrant and green. Only the songs have fallen silent. Where there were once choirs, there are now only echoes of their own memory. The priest sits beside the sacred hearth. The flame burns low, steady as ever. He feeds it gently with a thin branch of oak, listening to the faint crackle. The fire has been kept alive here for nearly 1,000 years, passed from hand to hand, flame to flame. It is said that when the fire of Delphi goes out, so too will the voice of Apollo. He wonders if that is merely a story told to comfort the faithful, or if the god truly dwells within the fire's heart. Either way, it is his duty to keep it alive until the end. He takes out a small scroll, worn soft by handling. The papyrus holds a record of centuries, questions and answers, visions and silences. He traces a line written in his own hand decades ago. All things return to stillness. He had not understood those words when he first wrote them. Now he does. A faint sound draws his attention, footsteps approaching the gate. He turns. A young woman stands there, hesitant, carrying a small basket. She wears no ornaments, no veil. Only the look of someone seeking something she cannot name. He motions for her to enter. Her sandals scuff softly across the stones. She bows lightly and places the basket before the altar. Inside lie 3 figs, a folded cloth, and a small bronze coin. An offering, simple, sincere. She does not speak. He waits, patient. Finally, she whispers. They say the god no longer answers. He studies her face. The question beneath her words is ancient. He answers softly. Sometimes silence is the answer. She lowers her head, uncertain. He gestures for her to sit. They sit together in the cool shade of the column. He tells her, in the slow, steady rhythm of a man accustomed to ritual, that faith is not the sound of a voice, but the act of listening. That the divine has never vanished, only changed its shape, and that perhaps the god now speaks through memory, through the patience of those who remember how to wait. The girl listens. Her eyes soften. For a long time, neither speaks. The fire crackles quietly. Somewhere outside, a bird calls, then falls silent again. The mountain seems to rest, wrapped in its own ancient calm. When she finally departs, she leaves behind the folded cloth. He unfolds it. Inside lies a single sprig of laurel, freshly cut. He smiles faintly. The gesture is small, but it means the flame will live another day. As evening deepens, he tends to the sanctuary once more. He moves slowly through each chamber, touching the walls, adjusting the offerings, brushing dust from the marble. Each motion feels like farewell, but without sorrow. He has learned that endings can be as gentle as dawn. At last, he stands before the temple gate and looks toward the fading horizon. The valley lies in shadow. He thinks of all those who came here seeking truth. Kings and shepherds, soldiers and poets, mothers and wanderers. Their questions were different, but their hope was always the same. And hope, he knows, is what keeps the gods alive. He returns to the hearth one final time. The flame wavers, reflecting in his calm eyes. He kneels and whispers, "If this is your last word, let it be peace." Then, as the wind sighs through the colonnade, he closes the bronze lid of the brazier. The fire dims, not extinguished, but contained. The smoke rises, thin as breath, and disappears into the gathering night. Outside, the first stars begin to shine. The temple stands silent, serene. The priest lingers at the threshold, watching the sky deepen into indigo. In that stillness, he senses it again, that subtle hum like the heartbeat of the world. He realizes that Delphi was never a place for answers. It was always a place for listening. Long after he is gone, travelers will still climb the mountain. They will walk among the ruins, touch the cold stone, and wonder what secrets once lived there. And though the god's voice has faded, the silence will remain vast, patient, and filled with meaning. In that silence, the mountain will keep whispering to whoever dares to listen. For even when the oracle sleeps, the world remembers the sound of its breath. Centuries pass in silence. Mount Parnassus does not change, not in the way that men do. Its cliffs remain pale and unyielding, washed clean by rain, warmed by countless dawns. But the temple, the once living heart of Delphi, slips slowly into sleep. The columns crumble one by one, the roof caves in, the marble shatters into white fragments scattered across the hillside. Where the sacred fire once burned, only weeds grow, their roots twisting through the cracks of forgotten altars. For a long time, the world forgets the oracle's name. Empires rise, religions shift, languages fade like ink left too long in the sun. Delphi becomes a ghost of its own legend, whispered of in monasteries, half remembered by travelers who claim they have heard the mountain murmur at night. The silence grows thick enough to be mistaken for peace. Then, one spring morning in the 19th century, a small team of French archaeologists begins to dig. The village that had been built over the ruins, Castery, wakes to the sound of picks and shovels striking stone. At first, the villagers are suspicious. The ruins are part of their daily landscape, useful for building walls and repairing roofs. But curiosity soon softens caution. They gather near the worksite, watching as the ground slowly yields its secrets. The archaeologists work patiently. Their notebooks fill with sketches and measurements. They uncover broken statues, marble torsos without heads, hands still extended as if in mid-blessing. They find the fragments of inscriptions, letters carved so finely they still catch the morning light. Each stone, each shard, tells a small, quiet story. But the mountain keeps most of its secrets buried deep. One of the men, a young assistant named Henri, pauses one afternoon as his spade strikes something hollow. He kneels, brushing aside the dust with the tenderness of someone handling a sleeping relic. A faint shape emerges, the edge of a carved column base, perfectly circular, engraved with faint Greek letters. The sunlight glances off it, and for a moment, Henri imagines he hears a whisper rising from the earth. Not a sound exactly, more like the thought of sound. He glances around, but the others are still working, unaware. He exhales and continues brushing the dust away. By evening, the team has uncovered part of a small chamber. They think it may have been a treasury, a place where offerings to the god were once kept. Inside, they find coins from different corners of the ancient world. Silver from Athens, bronze from Syracuse, gold from the Aegean Islands. The archaeologists note their findings carefully, but when night falls, Henri remains by the site a little longer. He watches the moon rise over the cliffs, bathing the stones in a light so pale it feels unreal. He cannot explain it, but there is a presence here, something that hums beneath the earth, steady and patient, as if the mountain itself remembers every footstep, every prayer, every sigh. The next morning, the team uncovers the remains of a narrow fissure beneath the floor, a natural cleft in the rock. It runs deep into the mountain, releasing a faint, cool breath of air. One of the workers remarks that it smells faintly of resin, or perhaps something mineral. The older archaeologist nods. Local legends had long mentioned vapors rising from beneath the temple. The breath of Apollo, they called it. For centuries, scholars dismissed the idea as myth. Now, kneeling before the fissure, Henri feels that the myth had always contained a kernel of truth. He imagines the ancient priestess, the Pythia, seated above that very crack in the rock, inhaling the sacred fumes as she spoke. He imagines the murmuring pilgrims, the scent of laurel and oil, the flicker of flames against polished bronze. For a fleeting moment, the air seems thicker, warmer, as if the past has slipped momentarily into the present. Then, just as suddenly it is gone. Only the wind remains, whispering through the scaffolding and ropes. That night, As the camp settles into stillness, Henri sits by the lamplight, writing in his journal. His words are careful, deliberate. He writes not just about artifacts, but about sensations, the faint vibration in the stones, the scent of old smoke still trapped in the cracks. He writes about silence, and how it seems alive here, almost conscious. He writes that perhaps the god never left Delphi. Perhaps the god simply changed form, from voice to echo, from presence to memory. The candle burns low. He listens to the night sounds, the soft creak of rope, the distant call of an owl, the slow exhale of wine down the valley. Somewhere in that rhythm, he senses a message. Not for him, exactly, but through him. He closes his notebook, smiles faintly, and lets the thought rest. Tomorrow, more dust will be cleared, more stones revealed. But for now, the past has already spoken enough. The fire in the camp dwindles. The archaeologists drift to sleep, one by one. The mountain looms dark and calm, its silhouette outlined against the stars. And deep within the rock, where the fissure breathes its unseen breath, the silence continues, unbroken, eternal, patient as ever, is almost equal to 6,400 characters. Morning returns to Delphi, pale and tender. Mist drifts between the broken columns like a living memory, curling and stretching as sunlight slowly filters through. The archaeologists resume their work, their tools clinking softly, a fragile rhythm against the vast hush of the mountain. Each stroke of the brush lifts away centuries of sleep. Each fragment of stone whispers a forgotten name. Henri kneels near the fissure again, taking notes while the others measure and map. He feels the air from below, cool and dry, brushing his face like a breath from another world. He knows the old accounts, that the priestess of Apollo, seated above this cleft, spoke words not her own, carried on vapors rising from the heart of the mountain. Scholars once argued whether those vapors were real or merely symbolic, the spirit of inspiration itself. Now, kneeling here, he wonders if truth might live quietly between the two. Perhaps the divine, he thinks, has always needed both stone and story. The team works until the sun climbs high. They uncover a section of wall where faint traces of red pigment remain, lines that once formed part of a mural. The figures are nearly erased, but a shape can still be discerned. A laurel branch, a hand, perhaps a face half-turned in silence. It is all that survives of what must have been a vivid scene of ritual or prophecy. Henri sketches it carefully, imagining the colors as they once were: ochre, vermilion, soft gold. The past flickers briefly into presence, then fades again under the weight of noon. Later that day, they find a small bronze tablet inscribed with words nearly illegible. The letters have softened with time, worn smooth by the earth. After careful cleaning, they read, "The god's voice endures not in thunder, but in breath." The men exchange quiet glances. They record it, tag it, and place it among other finds. Yet Henri lingers, tracing the inscription with his fingertips. He feels a faint tremor beneath the words, as if the metal itself remembers being spoken to. When the day ends, the archaeologists descend to the village. The sun sinks behind Parnassus, casting long violet shadows across the stones. Children run between the workers' tents, chasing the fading light. The villagers have grown fond of the strangers now, bringing them bread, olives, and stories. Old men recall strange dreams, of voices in the wind, of flames that burned without smoke. One woman swears that, during the previous night, she heard a soft humming rising from the ruins, like a song sung without words. Henri listens without skepticism. He knows that the earth sometimes hums when it remembers. That evening, he walks alone back to the site. The path glows faintly under the moon. The ruins are quiet, but not empty. A different kind of presence fills them, one that does not require form or proof. He sits beside a fallen column and closes his eyes. The stones hold warmth from the day's sun, and beneath it, a deep coolness from the mountain's heart. He breathes slowly, and for a moment, the line between now and then softens. He can almost hear the faint murmur of ancient voices layered within the wind. They are not words he can understand, yet their rhythm is familiar, slow, deliberate, patient. It is as if the oracle's language has survived in the cadence of air itself. The same pauses, the same measured tone that once calmed kings and wanderers alike. Perhaps, he thinks, all sacredness is simply the art of listening with reverence. In the distance, an owl calls, once, twice, and silence returns. Henri opens his eyes and gazes at the outline of the temple. Even in ruin, its design remains harmonious. Each column stands not merely as stone, but as intention, the geometry of devotion. He recalls something his mentor once said, "The divine is not above us. It is what happens when we build something beautiful enough to listen back." He did not fully understand then. Now, surrounded by fragments of marble that seem to glow under the moon, he finally does. He rises and walks to the fissure. The night air seeps upward, cool and steady. He kneels, resting a hand lightly on the rock. The stone hums faintly under his palm. Or perhaps it is only his heartbeat he feels reflected back. Either way, it is the same conversation humanity has always had with the unknown. You ask, it answers in silence. Before returning to camp, Henri takes one last look at the valley. The lights of the village flicker below like scattered offerings. He imagines the centuries compressed into a single breath. Priest and archaeologist, both kneeling at the same place, separated by time, but joined by curiosity. The god may have vanished from belief, but not from longing. That longing, soft, persistent, is what survives when temples crumble. Back in his tent, Henri writes by lantern light. He notes the inscription, the mural, the villagers' tales. Then, in smaller script, almost hidden in the margin, he writes, "The god still speaks, through stone, through silence, through the patient work of hands that remember." He closes his notebook, exhales, and lets the night settle. Outside, the wind moves gently across the ruins, threading through the broken pillars, stirring dust and moonlight alike. The sound is soft, unhurried, the same sound, perhaps, that once preceded a prophecy. It continues long after Henry's lantern fades, long after his breathing evens into sleep. The mountain listens, as it always has, and somewhere deep within its heart, the last echo of the god hums, low, steady, eternal. Days lengthen and fold into one another. The excavation becomes a ritual of its own. Brushes moving like clock hands, the slow exhale of dust, the faint ring of metal on marble. Each evening, the workers mark progress on paper maps pinned beneath stones to keep them from the wind. The sight grows a little clearer, a little quieter, as if it, too, is remembering how to breathe. Henri moves carefully between the columns, tracing the outlines of once perfect geometry. He notes how every base aligns to a vanished axis. Every fragment belongs to a symmetry, now invisible. He begins to sense what the builders once knew instinctively, that architecture is a kind of prayer frozen in form. Each angle, each distance, each carved fluting was not decoration, but devotion. The ancients had shaped mathematics into faith, and the result was balance. One afternoon, while clearing debris from what they believe was an antechamber, a student finds a small stone block carved with shallow grooves. At first, they mistake it for part of a staircase. But when light hits at the right angle, patterns emerge. Not letters, not drawings, but sound. Henri realizes it may be a kind of musical notation, an ancient system of rhythm. They photograph it, measure it, copy it on a tracing paper. When he runs his fingers across the grooves, he feels their deliberate spacing. Long, short, long pause. A pulse. It feels less like writing and more like breathing made permanent. That night, he sits by the lantern, examining the copy. The rhythm on the paper seems to echo faintly in his head. He imagines the temple filled with sounds centuries ago. Lyres, voices, footsteps on marble floors. Perhaps the oracles spoke in measured tones not only for effect, but in harmony with the space itself. Sound rising to meet stone, stone answering with resonance. A dialogue not between human and God, but between material and meaning. The next morning, he returns early, before the others arrive. The air is cool. carrying the scent of pine from the slopes above. He places his hand again upon the column nearest the fissure and hums softly, matching the pulse from the carved stone. The tone vibrates gently against his palm, then fades. He tries again, slower. This time, the echo seems to linger, a faint shimmer that passes through the air. He stands still, unsure whether he has awakened an echo or imagined it. Either way, it is enough. When the rest of the team arrives, Henri says nothing. Some discoveries, he knows, are meant to remain quiet. Not because they are secrets, but because they are sacred in their stillness. He lets the others continue their work, their tools filling the silence with purpose. Each strike of the trowel feels like punctuation in an ancient sentence that is still being written. At midday, they uncover the base of a statue, shattered long ago. Only the feet remain, carved in astonishing detail, veins and tendons etched with precision. The rest has been lost, yet the stance is enough to suggest movement, confidence, grace. Henri studies the feet and imagines the figure that once stood upon them. A god, perhaps, or a poet, or a priestess. Whatever it was, its presence endures through absence, a paradox only the ancient world seems to master. Later, as shadows lengthen across the site, Henri reads an old translation of Pindar aloud to the team. The voice of stone endures beyond the age of man. They smile, half listening as they pack up tools. But the words settle somewhere between them and the earth, unspoken yet understood. That evening, a gentle rain begins, the first in weeks. It falls lightly over the ruins, darkening the marble and filling cracks with silver threads. The archaeologists take shelter, yet Henri remains for a while under his cloak, watching the droplets gather in the grooves of the carved stone. He realizes the pattern channels water in precise paths, not random, but intentional. The builders had designed it to sing when it rained. He leans closer and hears it. Faint, musical, the mountains own him. No orchestra, no priestess, only wind and water performing together on instruments carved millennia ago. When he finally returns to camp, the others are asleep. He opens his journal and writes, slowly and carefully. The ancients did not build to defy time. They built so that time itself would learn their language. He closes the notebook and sets it beside the lantern. Outside, the rain softens into mist. The ruins shimmer under the moonlight, their surfaces alive with reflection. Each droplet becomes a small echo of the stars above, a conversation between sky and stone. As he drifts to sleep, Henri dreams of the temple restored, columns gleaming, fires burning, voices rising. The oracle stands again above the fissure, her eyes calm, her mouth moving with words he cannot hear. But behind her, the mountain hums the same note he had felt earlier, low, resonant, patient. He wakes before dawn, the sound still vibrating in his chest, as if the dream had left a resonance behind. He steps outside. The sky is turning pale blue, the first light touching the peaks. The valley below still sleeps, wrapped in fog. He feels a quiet gratitude, not for discovery, but for permission, as though the mountain, the ruins, the silence itself have allowed them to listen. He turns toward the temple and whispers, almost to himself, "We are still learning your language." The wind answers softly, carrying dust, memory, and morning light together. And somewhere in that mingling, a meaning stirs that words cannot hold. Long before the oracle's chamber fell silent, the city that surrounded it pulsed with rhythm and ritual. Beyond the temple walls, life in ancient Delphi unfolded in slow layers, sacred and mundane, divine and domestic. The temple stood high above the valley, but the hum of everyday life rose steadily toward it like incense. Imagine, if you will, the winding streets of Delphi in the late afternoon, sunlight spilling across limestone steps, narrow alleys breathing with the scent of olive oil and wet clay. Merchants call softly from shaded stalls, their voices carrying hints of spice and salt from the harbors below. A woman kneels by a fountain carved in the likeness of a nymph, rinsing figs in cool water. Children chase each other through courtyards where time grows between the stones. Farther uphill, musicians tune their lyres, their notes fluttering through the air like birds seeking roost. all of it part of the same rhythm. The living heartbeat of a city that believed itself watched, measured, and remembered by the gods. Above them all, the priests and priestesses of Apollo dwell in another realm entirely. Their homes are simple yet purposeful, built from marble fragments that seem to glow at dusk. They rise before dawn to prepare for rituals, washing their hands in spring water, thought to carry divine clarity. Their garments, woven from fine wool, are bleached white to reflect the purity demanded by their duties. Meals are taken in quiet moderation, bread dipped in honey, olives, a little wine. They speak sparingly, conserving both their words and their energy for the ceremonies that sustain Delphi's spiritual center. The elite families who fund the temple come and go in their gilded processions. They climb the sacred way with attendants, bringing offerings, bronze tripods, laurel wreaths, carved reliefs bearing their names. Their steps are slow, deliberate, aware that each movement carries meaning. In their minds, generosity is a language, and marble is how one speaks it. They build treasuries not merely to store gifts, but to preserve memory, small sanctuaries of wealth meant to echo their legacy into eternity. To them, faith and reputation are threads of the same tapestry. The gods are patrons, and worship is a form of diplomacy. Still, even within this hierarchy, the air carries a strange equality. In the shadow of Apollo's sanctuary, a farmer and a statesman both kneel before the same altar. The same smoke from their offerings curls upward, indistinguishable in its ascent. In that moment, as the priest chants softly in the distance, every life, humble or powerful, seems to dissolve into the same silence. It is a rare kind of stillness, one that holds both reverence and release. This, perhaps, is what bound Delphi together. Not wealth or status, but a shared awareness of time. Time was not merely counted but honored, not chased but circled around. The festivals, the sacrifices, the quiet rituals, all followed celestial patterns that echoed the movements of the sun and moon. Days unfolded with patience, like unfolding petals. Seasons turned not with urgency, but with inevitability. And in the pauses between those turns, people found a kind of peace. At the end of each day, as the sun dipped behind Mount Parnassus, the city softened. Shadows lengthened across courtyards, lamps were lit, and a hush fell like a slow exhale. From the temple terrace, one could see the valley bathed in gold, olive groves shimmering like liquid metal. The distant bay caught the last of the light, and the faint murmur of prayers drifted upward, carried by wind. The city, the temple, and the mountains seemed to breathe as one being, slow, vast, and eternal. For those who lived close to the sanctuary, life followed the rhythm of offerings and oracles. Each morning, smoke rose from the altars. Each afternoon, visitors arrived, seeking words from beyond. Each evening, they left with silence, perhaps a fragment of wisdom, or perhaps only a reflection of themselves. The priest said little, the oracle even less, and yet people felt changed by the mere act of waiting. In a world so governed by uncertainty, by famine, by war, by the whim of rulers, the stillness of Delphi offered something solid, something that did not waver. Even if the answers were obscure, the act of seeking was a comfort in itself. Centuries later, that stillness remains, buried beneath the dust and the years. When the archaeologists walk among the stones, they follow the same paths once walked by merchants and nobles alike. Their footsteps echo faintly, repeating an old rhythm, a rhythm that perhaps never stopped. The difference lies only in the ears that listen. The mountain, after all, does not forget. It holds the murmurs of all who have ever climbed its slopes, the prayers, the footsteps, the whispers of awe and ambition, and it carries them forward, folded into the wind that moves through the ruins today. So when Henri stands at the site in silence, he is not alone. He stands among shadows of those who once believed that each offering, each sound, each gesture mattered. He breathes the same air that once shimmered with incense and chants. And as the wind moves gently through the hollow columns, he senses what they must have known. That stillness itself was a form of worship. a conversation between the living and the eternal, spoken softly in the language of time. When the rituals concluded, and the incense smoke had thinned into pale threads rising above the sanctuary, life continued, not with noise or frenzy, but with the patient rhythm of the Greek world. For every offering made to Apollo, there followed a feast, not the riotous revelry often imagined in myth, but something quieter, restrained, and steeped in formality. In these gatherings, the boundaries between sacred and social dissolved like wax near a flame. Imagine a long marble courtyard beneath a canopy of grapevines. Oil lamps hang from iron hooks, their lights soft and amber. A mosaic floor glints faintly in the evening glow, patterned with mythic scenes, a lyre, a laurel, a winged god mid-flight. Guests recline on couches arranged in gentle symmetry, each draped with woven cloth dyed in earth tones. The air hums with low conversation, the muted clink of ceramic bowls, the faint strumming of a lyre at the edge of the gathering. It is not celebration that fills the air, but contemplation, a communal stillness shared through presence rather than speech. The host, usually a patron of the temple or a local dignitary, begins the evening with a libation. Wine, dark and fragrant, is poured slowly from a bronze crater into smaller cups. A few drops fall deliberately onto the floor, an offering to the unseen. Then, the first toasts are raised, not to conquest or fortune, but to harmony, health, and the gods who watch over both. The conversations that follow drift like lazy currents. Politics of distant cities, new poetry from Athens, the omens read from flights of birds. Nothing urgent, nothing heated, just the slow weaving of human thought into the soft fabric of the night. At the center of the feast lies a table of simple abundance. Roasted barley, olives cured in salt, figs bursting with sweetness, cheese wrapped in leaves, and fish grilled in fragrant herbs. There are no towering platters, no excess. The elegance lies in proportion, in the art of sufficiency. Each flavor is meant to balance the next, much like the columns of the temple balance the weight of heaven and earth. Even the act of eating is measured, deliberate, almost sacred. It is said that the guests of Delphi often spoke of their meals as if they were rituals. Nourishment not only for the body, but for the bond between men, gods, and time itself. As the evening deepens, a young musician plucks a quiet tune. The melody drifts through the courtyard, soft enough that it never demands attention, only invites it. The notes rise, linger, and fall, mingling with the scent of pine smoke and honeyed wine. Laughter fades into murmurs. Conversation slows. Each guest becomes absorbed in the calm rhythm of the moment, that peculiar serenity found only when the world outside seems to stop moving. Some close their eyes, some stare into the lamp's trembling flame. There is peace here, not in the absence of sound, but in the harmony of it all blending together. Outside the courtyard, the streets of Delphi sleep. Merchants have shuttered their stalls. The mountain winds have grown cool and thin. Even the night animals seem hushed, as though unwilling to disturb the spell that hangs over the valley. Above, stars glimmer faintly through wisps of drifting smoke, each one mirrored in the wine-dark cups below. It is an image both simple and eternal, earth and sky in quiet dialogue. Among the guests, stories begin to surface. An elder recalls the oracle's last great prophecy. Another speaks softly of a journey across the Aegean, of storms and narrow escapes. Their words are slow, unhurried, often trailing into silence mid-thought. The others do not press them to continue. They understand that meaning, like truth, arrives only in its own time. Even speech seems secondary to the act of being together, breathing the same perfumed air beneath the same watching stars. When the musician's song fades, the host rises once more. A final toast is offered, this time to memory, to all those who came before and to all those yet to come. The guests sip in unison. The wine glows deep red under the lamplight, catching hints of gold where oil flickers on the surface. A quiet prayer follows. May the flame within us burn steady, not bright. And with that, the night begins to dissolve. One by one, the guests depart, their sandals brushing softly against the mosaic. Their shadows stretch long across the courtyard, mingling with the scent of extinguished lamps and fruit skins left on plates. Soon, only the sound of the mountain breeze remains, threading through the vines. The courtyard grows dim, the last lamp flickering out with a sigh. In the darkness, the marble seems almost to breathe, as though the stones themselves remember every word spoken, every note played, every heartbeat that once filled this space. Centuries later, when archaeologists uncover shards of pottery, fragments of wall paintings, and traces of ash, they unknowingly touch these same echoes. The past has cooled, but it has not vanished. The dust carries laughter, prayer, and the faint fragrance of olive wood smoke. Each artifact is a whisper, faint but enduring, telling of nights when gods and mortals shared the same still air and the same quiet wonder. If you listen closely, you might almost hear it: the fading strum of the lyre, the murmur of a toast, the sigh of wind over stone. It is the sound of history at rest, the language of peace after worship, the stillness of a feast that never truly ended. Time, even in Delphi, could not be held still forever. Seasons shifted, empires rose, and fell like the breath of the mountain itself. The priests who once tended the altars grew fewer. The oracles spoke less often, and their words, once treated as sacred law, became quiet riddles no one remembered to solve. The pilgrims who had once filled the sacred way began to fade from the valley. Their footsteps gave way to grass, their offerings to dust. And still, the stones endured. Imagine the temple long after its fires had gone out. Wind moving gently through open colonnades, columns stripped of gold and color, yet more beautiful in their bareness. Wildflowers bloom between the fallen slabs. A shepherd passes now and then, his flock threading through the ruins where processions once moved in reverent lines. The air, once filled with chants and lyres, carries only the soft rustle of leaves and the faint ringing of distant goat bells. What was once the center of the world has become a quiet corner of it, and in that transformation lies a different kind of holiness. For centuries, Delphi slept. Its marble bones sank deeper into the earth. Rains washed the soil down for the mountain slopes, burying doorways, chambers, and statues alike. Earthworms tunneled through the dust of kings. Olive roots wrapped themselves around the foundations of forgotten shrines. Even the fissure beneath the oracle's seat, the breath of the god, filled slowly with silence. The temple's power did not vanish. It merely retreated into stillness, into waiting. When modern archaeologists first returned, the mountain greeted them not as conquerors, but as listeners. Their shovels struck against stone that seemed to sigh, releasing the faint scent of earth warmed by memory. They uncovered fragments of inscription, half-sentences and fading letters, prayers once spoken aloud to a god whose name still lingers in the wind. And those centuries had passed. The rhythm of their work mirrored the rhythm of those who built it. Lift, brush, pause. The same slow devotion, the same patience, the same surrender to time. In the quiet of those excavations, even science becomes a kind of prayer. Each measurement an offering, each discovery a whispered question. The archaeologists do not call upon Apollo, yet their reverence is unmistakable. They kneel before history, tracing its face with careful hands. In the moments between sound and silence, between excavation and contemplation, they join the long line of mortals who have stood upon this sacred ground, seekers of meaning, united by curiosity and awe. As Henri and his team work through another season, the mountain changes around them. The light in the valley shifts with the months. The air grows thin and cool. They find more fragments, parts of columns, a votive tablet, a carved marble hand still holding a sprig of laurel. He feels, more and more, that these remnants are not mere relics, but remnants of human hope. Every carved groove, every chiseled name, is a refusal to be forgotten. And though time has softened their edges, the intent endures. At night, when the campfire burns low, Henri sometimes sits alone facing the ruins. The mountain looms in silhouette, dark and steady. He wonders what those who built this place would think if they could see it now. Their temple uncovered, their language studied, Their gods remembered not in worship, but in whispers. Perhaps they would not mourn. Perhaps they would understand that every age reshapes the sacred in its own image, and that reverence, though it changes form, never truly dies. He closes his eyes and imagines the city reborn, terraces shining with marble, voices rising once again, processions climbing the sacred way beneath banners of gold. He can almost hear the hum of the oracle's voice, rising through the fissure like mist. Then, as always, the vision fades. The ruins remain. But the peace that follows is not sorrow. It is acceptance, the calm that comes from knowing that all things, even greatness, return to silence. In that silence, there's a lesson the modern world often forgets. That transience is not loss, but rhythm. That time, like the mountain, breathes in and out, giving and taking in the same motion. The Greeks understood this deeply. To them, decay was not an ending, but a continuation, the visible proof that existence had once been full and bright. They believed the gods watched over the cycle, not to prevent it, but to ensure it unfolded with balance. Harmony, even in ruin. Stillness, even in decline. And so, Delphi stands as both memory and mirror. The columns rise half-broken but proud. The stones shimmer under sunlight and moonlight alike. The mountain still whispers to the wind. Travelers visit, stand quietly among the ruins, and feel that peculiar stillness. A weight not of sadness, but of continuity. They sense, perhaps without knowing, that beneath the soil and the centuries, the sacred pulse still beats. Faint, patient, eternal. As the archaeologists pack their tool for the final time that season, Henri turns one last time toward the sanctuary. The valley glows in evening light. Olive trees shimmer below, their leaves whispering in slow rhythm. He bows his head, not in prayer, but in gratitude, and the breeze that answers seems almost to carry words, though too soft to understand. Perhaps the gods are not gone. Perhaps they have simply learned, like the mountain, to speak through silence. There comes a moment, at the end of every journey through the ancient world, when words begin to fall silent, when the noise of discovery, the careful logic of history, and the awe of beauty all dissolve into something simpler, stillness. It's in that stillness that Delphi speaks most clearly, not through prophecy, not through myth, but through presence. The valley now lies quiet beneath the mountain. The air holds a faint trace of time and stone dust. Sunlight slides slowly down the columns of the temple, the same way it has for thousands of years. Every broken capital, every fragment of inscription, every step of the sacred way carries an invisible resonance. The echo of footsteps, the murmur of languages long vanished, the hum of prayers that once filled this place. It's not the ruins themselves that move us, but what lingers inside them. The persistence of meaning across the collapse of time. Standing there, you begin to sense that the sacred is not something that once existed. It still does. Only now, it wears the shape of silence. The gods may not walk the earth, but the reverence they inspired remains, passing quietly from age to age. It lives in the questions we ask when we look upon the stones. Who built this? Why? What did they believe would last? And as we ask, we become part of the same continuum. We are, in some way, the modern pilgrims of Delphi. History is not a straight line. It is a spiral. Each era circles back, brushing against the echoes of the one before it. The Greeks built Delphi upon layers of older worship, and now we, in our search for meaning, build our own interpretations upon theirs. The stones remain constant, but the eyes that look upon them change. And that is how the sacred survives. Not frozen in time, but alive in remembrance. As the day fades, the light deepens into gold. The mountains stretch their long shadows across the ruins, and the air cools. The birds fall silent, one by one. In this hour, Delphi feels suspended, not ancient, not modern, but eternal. The boundaries between centuries blur, and the world grows almost weightless. It's as if time itself pauses to listen to its own echo. This is where the documentary ends, but the story never really does. Because Delphi is more than a place. It's an idea that keeps unfolding. An idea that whispers again and again. that wisdom begins in silence, that beauty endures through decay, that the divine is not beyond us, but within our attention to the world. You may walk away from these stones, but something of them walks away with you. Perhaps it's the stillness, or the sense that all human effort, art, faith, architecture, language, is just another way of reaching for harmony with the unseen. Perhaps it's the realization that even ruin has rhythm, and that we, too, are part of that rhythm. The camera rises slowly now, lifting above the sanctuary. From above, the ruins arrange themselves into quiet geometry. Terraces carved along the slope, the faint outline of the temple, the serpentine path of the sacred way winding down toward the valley. Olive trees shimmer like scattered silver coins in the last light. The mountains fade into pale blue haze, and for a moment, the entire landscape seems to breathe. A soft voice lingers, a thought, almost unspoken, that the past is not something behind us, but beneath us, and that to listen deeply to it is to remember what it means to be human. As night begins to fall, the first stars appear, bright, cold, ancient. They have looked down upon Delphi since the first fire was lit here. Empires have come and gone under their gaze, and still they burn, unchanged, reminding us that even in the vastness of time, the smallest spark of wonder endures. The final image holds on the mountain. Darkness deepens, but a thin silver line still traces the ridge, the last memory of daylight. Somewhere beyond it, the sea glimmers faintly. Wind moves through the valley, touching the stones one by one, as if passing on a message only the earth itself can understand. And then, nothing but silence. The kind of silence that isn't empty, but full, of echoes, of breaths, of everything that was ever said here, and everything that will ever be felt again. Delphi sleeps once more, but in its sleep, the world remembers.